Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Gems of Life show. I am so happy you're able to join us here today. And thank you, as always, coming into our space and allowing us to enter into your space. Today, I have Sheila, who is also a teacher in her professional life. She has worked with students, especially now in the pandemic, in class and online. And who better to give us some insights and gems of her professional life, and maybe, just maybe, we can learn something. And that is our intention here, to bring experts who know what they're talking about and to share their knowledge on how we can better ourselves and our children. So today, get your seats ready, get your cup of coffee, tea, or green smoothie, and please sit down and just listen to this, because you just never know what you may learn from this video today. Well, Sheila, welcome to the Gems of Life show.
Thank you so much, Fadhwa. That was a lovely introduction. Thank you so much for having me. And thank everyone for their time, because time is something that, especially parents, a lot of these days, it's a really challenging time for parents. And I really appreciate that as a teacher. So just a little background on me. I've been an elementary school teacher for 20 years. I founded my own organization called All of Me Counts. And that was inspired by many of the challenges that I experienced as a teacher. And by noticing that a lot of the ways that we teach and the ways that we address behavior are very focused on the external, on managing things, which we do need to do. We need to do all those things. But I was noticing that we weren't as focused on what was going on inside the child. So I developed what I call an inside out approach, which is just a more proactive way of really ensuring that kids are going into the world and into life with positive beliefs about themselves and ways of perceiving the world, so that they're resilient and so that they meet the challenges of life by having that inner confidence. So that's sort of the lens that I bring when I'm supporting parents and families. And I also, have the experience in schools. I've been doing this online thing. This has been a big learning experience for me as well. And I can see the challenges that poses for families, especially families that are working from home, trying to manage everything, trying to juggle everything. And I really appreciate the stress that is on families at this point. So
Wow. Thank you for sharing that, Sheila. I think, more than ever right now, parents and teachers are really struggling when it comes to online and even in-class learning, because everything has changed now, everything has shifted. What are the challenges that you were faced with? Because you've done both areas. What kind of challenges did you see that the teachers are being faced with, and the students as well, and the parents?
The biggest challenge, and this for me as a teacher, is actually it's a challenge and it's an opportunity at the same time. So one of the challenges for me as a teacher, throughout my 20 years, is that there's been a lot of new research around education and understanding a little bit more about how kids really learn. And so school has changed a lot, actually, since I was a kid, since I'm sure many of you were kids in school. And school has become, we've developed much more of an understanding that kids learn best when they are doing, when they are engaged, when they are doing real life things. So that's something that has been brought into schools. In kindergarten, we talk about play-based learning. We talk about how rich, how much richness there is in the regular activities that kids are doing when we can bring in, when we can really bring in learning to what they're already doing. So that's sort of what has been in schools. And so my concern with the online learning is, unfortunately, as a teacher, it creates an atmosphere where there's not as much of the opportunity to do that hands-on. And it has kids in front of screens a lot of the time. And it has us a bit back into that idea that learning is just taking in information. That's just, I just tell you, I just give you a bunch of information and then you just remember it. And then that's what learning is. And then the example that I like to use around this is if we look at how babies learn how to walk and talk. And if you think about it, we don't give them walking lessons. We don't correct them when they fall down. We don't, if they say baba instead of bottle, we celebrate that. We get excited for the little milestones that they make, and we don't expect that they're going to have it all perfect right away. And so that's a really good way to think about learning in general, whether it's learning how to read, learning math, kids learn by just being engaged in those activities. So baking in the kitchen, there's so much science and math and language things, reading a recipe. There's so much richness in just day-to-day life that if we're intentional about it, and we do need to be intentional about it, bringing in literacy, reading them stories, having things around the house. One of the things the two areas that I noticed in the last little while where kids aren't coming to school with as much of that pre-exposure is around writing and around money. And if you think about it, we're using our devices. They're not observing us writing things down. They're not observing. And that's the first stage of kids learning. There's so much that they take in just through their observations and just through the day-to-day regular things, the conversations that we have with them when we're out, when we're on a walk, what we draw their attention to, what kinds of questions are we asking them? Are we just telling them things, or are we getting them curious? Are we, asking them, why they think the sky is blue, instead of just telling them? And even allowing them to have some misconceptions and to work through that in their own way and to make meaning of things in their own way, and trust that they will, that any misconceptions will eventually be worked out. Just the same way we trust when kids are learning how to walk and talk, that process and that they will go through each stage. So that's something around the pandemic, I feel, has sort of really highlighted this idea of what is learning. And yes, we can learn obviously by listening, and we can learn by reading, and we can learn by taking things in. We can learn by all these things and in the more traditional ways. But the message I really want to get out is that is not the only way to learn. And in fact, if we take advantage of this opportunity, having kids home, spending time, we can actually make this a very rich time for kids, a rich time for learning and a rich time for connection, and in the family.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's really great way you summarized all that information. My goodness. So I have a son. My son, both my kids are doing online schooling.
Right.
My daughter is in grade 12. My son is in grade 6. So I know my daughter manages. My son, though, and I know there's a lot of kids struggling. How do we keep them motivated? just for them to go through, because it's hard. We have, as adults, we have this Zoom fatigue.
Yes.
Majority of the meetings are done through Zoom, right? And it's very hard because, especially for young kids, they miss out on that social aspect, playing with the kids and having that time. How do we keep our kids, our children, motivated?
Right. And that's something I actually talk a lot about with parents, and what I call internal, or intrinsic motivation versus external motivation. And our go-to as parents and as teachers, especially in the moment, is to sort of use either consequences or rewards, or just sort of things, exterior things that can get them to do what we want them to do in the moment. And sometimes that's necessary. Sometimes those things are needed in certain times. But if we're doing that, if that's all we're doing, what we're doing is we're creating the conditions where they're only going to act based on when they're told to, or when there's a consequence, or when there's a reward that they're going to get. So I talk a lot about what we can do to create that internal motivation to keep that alive in kids, because especially little kids, they're very eager and curious. And what tends to happen as kids get older is they lose the interest in things. And I know it's a challenge, because of course he has to be, he's going to school, and the right now he sort of has to be in front of that screen, right? One thing I always suggest is finding out what your child's passionate about. What is it that they really either enjoy doing, or what are they interested in? And think about ways that you can bring that into the things that they have to do. I would say most teachers are sort of aware of or there's tends to be a certain flexibility. If a child's doing a project or whatever, they can choose the topic and things like that. Like bringing the things that they enjoy into it, and whatever you can do to make some of those tasks, whether it's a homework thing, something that's authentic. So something where they feel there's a real purpose behind what they're doing. An example of this is when I actually taught grade 6 at one point, and I had the entire class in charge of the breakfast program. So they had to do the budget, they had to survey the school and find out, what was everybody's favorite foods. They had to look at all the nutrition labels and the percentages of different things on the in the packages, and find out the serving sizes and calculate all these things. There was such rich learning and math in that, and they were so motivated and engaged because it was for something real, like they knew their decisions, the decisions that they made about what food items to choose was based on the real information they were getting from the kids. And it was they were doing something that had a real impact. I know this is challenging sometimes because, of course, there's certain things that kids have to do when it comes to school. But wherever you can make a connection, or even sometimes if you look at what let's say they enjoy making videos, or they enjoy a certain program on the computer. I know personally myself, I love being creative and doing something, on Canva or something. So for me, if I have a task to do and I get to do it on Canva and be creative about it, I'm more motivated to do it, even if it's the same thing if I did on Word, Sometimes just making little tweaks like that, bringing in the things that they're good at, bringing in the things they're interested in, bringing in the things they enjoy, can make a lot of difference of how engaged they are and how how interested. And then I would say have it lots of breaks, with the Zoom fatigue. I know what you're saying. As much as, and it's cold out now, I know that's tricky, but as much as you can sort of have breaks, come in, come out, give them, they need those times away so that when they are in front of the computer, they're it's easier for them to sit and all of that. So unfortunately, it's sort of lands on parents to bring that balance and to remember that when they're not in front of the computer, you might need to make an extra effort to go outside and to get exercise and to do all those things that they're not getting, that they would get at school, going out at recess and all that. So yeah, I know that's not always easy for families, but that's something to keep in mind.
Mhm. That's a really good point, actually. Well, now it's a little bit cold, but still, even if they were in school, they'll still be going outside, right?
Right.
Yes, yes. I like that idea. When they have that time, it's like 40 minutes, even a 10-minute walk outside just to get some fresh air will
Yeah.
do a lot of good. Yeah, because after school, they still have screen time, right? They're either playing their game or on the computer, interacting with the other, kids that they made friends with in class,
Right.
right? So what are the belief system that you see with the young kids? I know earlier on, before we started recording, you mentioned something, how kids now, they have this new belief system of what's happening right now and their understanding. Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, that's something I just want to bring awareness to. So, and this is especially relevant for younger children because we have to remember that everything we do is sending messages. And even when we do things with very good intentions for very good reasons, obviously, many we're doing during this pandemic is really to keep everybody safe. So it's in how we message that and how we talk to them about that. And we want to be careful and make sure that we're not giving them about themselves and about the world that could negatively impact them going forward. And this is something, I've observed. And so I'll give you an example. There was a picture I saw recently of a young child that had, I don't know how old the child was, maybe 6 or 7. And it was a picture, of kids playing and, kids with masks on. And there was a picture of kids in the background playing closely with each other or hugging or something. And there was a big X and the child said, "That's bad. That's bad because you're not supposed to go close." And so what we have to be aware of is that they're picking up, even if that's not what we're really saying, when we're saying, we're not saying it's bad, they can be picking up that messaging if they don't have the bigger understanding of things. And this is true for our messaging during the pandemic, but it's something I also speak to parents about in general, especially with younger children. We have to keep in mind that they're taking things in, and if they're not fully processing or if they don't have the big picture, some of those messages can go in a different way and affect them differently. So even saying things like, we have to keep away from our friends because we want to keep them safe, and we want everybody to stay healthy because we really care about them and they really care about you, and that's why we're doing this. And this is for this time because it's hard to know sometimes, depending on the age, how much to go into it, and I know that's probably something that parents struggle with, is knowing how much to go. And I would say, trust your judgment and trust your intuition around that, because that's different for every child. It's different depending on the age level, but more the actual what we're telling them, and more just around listen to what they're saying, and take notice if if there's some misconceptions, or there's some things that might affect how they see themselves and how they see the world. Because one of the things I talk about with this inside out approach is that we need to make sure that we're helping kids shape a healthy, what I call theory of the world, because how they perceive their experiences really determines everything, right? If I perceive myself as incapable, if I perceive the world as a scary place, if I perceive that nothing is fair, and a lot of kids will talk about it's not fair, it's not fair. Most of that has to do with how they're perceiving their experiences. And that theory of the world, so their beliefs about themselves and their beliefs about how their reality works, that gets developed quite young, and it happens very subtly. So it's just about being aware of how are they perceiving their experiences, how are they perceiving the pandemic and how everything, and are we helping them to shape a healthy way of seeing themselves, a healthy way of seeing the world, so that they can have a positive attitude going forward, so that they can feel confident going forward, so that they can bring resilience. And that comes from really focusing on what's going on within them, and how they're taking things in. So I hope that gives sort of a sense of, just some things that we can sort of bring into our awareness and think about as we're sharing about what's going on.
Mm-hmm. I like that fact that, you mentioned about it's internal, right? And pre-pandemic, as parents or even citizens of the world, we have our own stuff. We have our own programming that we bring to our, along our lives. And then when you have children, they inherit that from us, because they live with us, they see how we react, they see how we respond to situations, and they inherit that. They see how we do things, right? Now, in the midst of the pandemic, it's the same thing. They see how we react. They see how we see things. They see how we see the world. And if we see the world as, just like you said, it's one big scary place, and we are too fearful to even go anywhere or talk to anyone, our kids pick that. They see that, and they see, if my parent is so scared about this, then this is serious. Because again, they're inheriting everything from us.
Right.
And without us even knowing, subconsciously, we're actually programming how they see things and how they perceive things.
Right.
Because they don't just start from nowhere, right? They pick from us. They pick from people around them. Right. And it's at home. It starts at home. So before we start looking internally into their children, we need to start shifting and see how we perceive things, how we perceive the pandemic, how we perceive, the social aspect of how everyone has been affected, right? And if we feel there's some work needs to be done there, then we need to work on that. Because if we don't work on that, we are not capable of doing anything for our children.
Right.
Absolutely. Because they pick from us, right? So if we still continue saying, this is the worst time, it's the worst year, they pick on it. And that's how they come out, and they internalize all that information, and they go to school or they go online, and they feel disempowered. They feel like, what's the purpose, right? The world is a scary place, no motivation. And if they see there is no motivation there, then how do we empower them, right? So I think we need to have more conversation actually about this, and see how is it that, because we do play a big role, right, in our children, and we need to start having those conversations. It's been a year, right? It's been a year since the pandemic started, and I think we're way ahead of where we were before, because now we have a better understanding of how things are. That fear is not as it was before, where something new and we are clueless and everybody's running away from each other suspiciously.
Yeah.
But now we have that knowledge, we have the understanding, and we see how things are. And guess what? It's not that big, scary thing, because everyone in the world are going through the same thing, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I really thank you so much for coming in today. And I know you had, as a teacher, you had to adjust, you had to adapt. And it just shows you that we have that within ourselves, that we have that ability within ourselves to adjust, to shift how we see things, how we do things, and to adapt. And it's in our human nature.
Yeah. Oh, and I love what you said about kids pick up on our anxieties, right? One thing I know as a teacher is I have to check myself going into school. If I want to have a good day, I've got to make sure I'm balanced in myself. I've got to make sure that I'm dealing with my own fears, my own anxieties, because kids have a way of reflecting that back to us. So yes, for sure, really, really working on ourselves is really, really important. So yes, and I agree that these are conversations that we really need to be having to really know how we can support ourselves, and it's extra challenging for parents because parents have the task of not only having to parent a child but also having to parent themselves through some pretty stressful and challenging times.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I had one last question. I know you mentioned about misconception. What is the misconception that you see out there when it comes to online learning? Because I know there's a lot of parents out there, and even in class, because there's still that fear associated, because you still have parents like myself who want their kids at home, and there's that misconception of having the kid at home instead of taking them to school. What are the misconceptions on both ends, and what can we do from our end to just remove those barriers that we've placed within ourselves?
Right. Well, I think, it's obviously it's a decision for parents in terms of what they feel is best for their child and for their family, in terms of going to school and staying at home. So I don't necessarily want to give, a one recommendation or the other, but I do have the experience of both. So I can at least provide information around, what's going on in school, give that information so that, parents can make informed decisions. So yeah, school is a bit different. There are different things. Kids are wearing masks. The one thing I want to say about the school environment, and something I was concerned about that I'm actually encouraged, is that the kids are actually adapting quite well to a lot of these protocols and things that I was thinking that they might, I, especially teaching at a kindergarten age level, I was concerned at that age level, would they be able to wear their mask? Would we be constantly correcting them? And but they're adapting quite well to the changes. So the school provides a little bit, some of that social interaction, some more of that sort of hands-on learning. Obviously, there's less that we can do. There's definitely it has changed a little bit of the type of learning that's happening at schools because of some of those restrictions. But it's still an opportunity for them to have that social interaction and, learn in an environment where they're around other people. And those safety measures are in place. And, I feel, and this is just, I'm only speaking from my own personal experience, teachers are wearing their PPE and things like that. And, with everything that's put in place, I feel relatively safe in that environment. And then around the home piece, the home online learning, I think, I think I spoke to the misconception around learning being only something that you do when you're sitting, when you're taking things in, when you're, you know, we have these ideas because of how we learned in school. You know, when I was in school, it was like we were in rows, we didn't talk to each other. We, you know, the teacher gave us our work, we did it quietly. And so we've developed these ideas that that's what learning is, when now we really understand that learning is a behavior. Learning, you're always learning. Learning is happening, and actually rich learning is happening when kids are doing a variety of different things. So I think the variety, if your child is at home, it's that much more important that you're bringing variety in other ways, you know, getting them off the screens and doing activities where they're building or creating or creative types of things, going outside. That is learning, and that's very, very important for their development. So that, I guess, would be the biggest message, I think, if your child is at home doing online learning.
Yeah, yeah, wonderful. Wow, Sheila. Today you just shared with us gems. I call them the gems of life, you know, in your professional life. And thank you so much. I really appreciate you just taking your time and sharing your experience with us. Thank you so much. Any last message to our audience?
I'll just say that, so my organization, All of Me Counts, and I support families, either through, if there's behavior challenges or you need support with learning, or if you just want support in general, especially around this pandemic with things that are happening, guidance. I am more than happy to help with any of that. So you can find me at www.allofmecounts.com.
Wonderful. Perfect. And I'll actually have your information there. So whoever is looking forward to reaching out to you, they'll know how to get access to you as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Fadhwa. This was a wonderful opportunity.
My pleasure. My pleasure. It was wonderful to have you, and I look forward to actually more conversations with you, Sheila.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, everyone else, thank you so much. I hope you had time to just pick on a couple of things. I know it's a tough time for a lot of parents right now, whether your child is in school or online. It's something that we all have to adapt to. And one thing I know for sure, that we will go past through this. It's just temporary. It's not going to last forever. We managed the past year, and 2021 looks with, you know, positivity. That's how I see it. It's the year of opportunity. That's what I call 2021. So it's learning, and we're growing through this, and you are growing with your children at home because you're finding more stuff about them. So just find some creative ways to learn with them and grow with them. And you know what better way to bond with your children? Well, thank you for sharing our space with us, and thank you for having us in your space. Like always, aspire to inspire. That's what I always leave you with, that message. Until then, I'll see you soon. Stay well and safe.